Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jerry, and today we have my Week 12 power rankings where I'm going to go over every single team, let you know where they rank for me, 1 through 32. And we didn't have a lot of movers this week. There was a few that moved very wide margins. A couple teams that, in my personal opinion, I probably left hope for a little too long. So they finally got their move back that they deserve. Like you saw, if you've been watching the Packers, I had them a bit too high, so they had a nice move back a few weeks ago. But let me know what you think of the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And let's get right into this new last ranked team, the Jacksonville Jaguars at 32. As I was just talking about, kind of some teams where I was holding on to hope. Trevor Lawrence gets injured, and the first week of that, they really look very dysfunctional, and it didn't work. But I go, yeah, he could come back. And Mac Jones, it was his first week. There could be better, they could get better. I don't want to overreact to that. Then they play a close game against the Vikings, who early on have been a great football team this year, but have kind of fallen off, and Sam Darnold has been Sam Darnolding again. So, then they play this one against the Lions and just get absolutely smoked. No hope. Widest margin of yards in history in a game, and then the point margin was record breaking too. So it was just a Class A fucking ass beating, and the Jaguars get smoked, and they move back 8 spots. One of the biggest movers of the year to 32, right behind the Raiders, who I'll give you a heads up now. All these teams between 24 and 32, the only reason that any of them have moved up is because the Jaguars moved back. So the Raiders still don't look good. They play the Bengals, and they basically just throw the ball to Brock Bowers. That's basically the offense. And you really don't have much more than Max Crosby on defense. Jack Jones, exciting player. Bob Spillane, but really need a lot of help all over the place there. So they stay towards the back at 31 behind the Tennessee Titans, who showed a little bit of promise when Will Levis was taken out on the offensive side, but really not able to put it together. They get beat by 10 to the Vikings. So I think another case of the Vikings playing down to their opponent. This is a game where the Tennessee Titans were in it for a decent amount of the game and still not able to get the win. And not really a surprise, but again, they just move up because the Jaguars move back, and the Titans sit behind the Giants, who in a bye week didn't play a game. They really just move up again because Jaguars move back. Similar story for the Browns. Now the Browns in this week, they play the Saints, and the Saints, Jameis really threw the ball everywhere. He had a great game. He almost had, I think he almost had 400 yards, or I know he had 300, and a great game overall from Jameis, but couldn't find the end zone. And on the other side of the ball, Taysom Hill was running all over the place and kind of ruined the day for the Browns. So the Browns take a loss at 2-8, and but they move up. They move up one spot again, more because of the Jaguars. And then same thing here with the Panthers. Panthers have been winning games, though. So you do have that going for you if you're a Carolina Panther fan. This particular week, they have a bye week. They get a win in kind of hopefully moving in the right direction. But again, nothing to judge them on. So they move up because of Jaguars moving back. Dallas Cowboys have been one of the worst teams in the league. They move. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was right to move the Cowboys behind the Panthers with the Panthers on a bye week, although recency bias would say that the Panthers have been playing better. So the Cowboys are definitely a team that could be approaching 30 in the following weeks, but with how bad the teams did behind them too, I just didn't really see a place for them. So I left the Cowboys, up a little higher than I probably should at 26. I also don't think that the Cowboys will be in a place where I'll move them to the back. I guess they could. I shouldn't say that I won't, but I definitely could see them reaching that 30 mark. But for now, they sit at 26 behind the New England Patriots, who lose to the Rams. But again, Patriots are kind of where you start to get to me, first, functional looking team. Obviously, the Giants had released, I didn't even talk about it, but they released Daniel Jones. And then you've got a lot of some major glaring issues with all the teams behind them. The Patriots, you can at least see the upside. So they stay at the top of the dysfunctional group at the back at 25, at 3-8. And I think upside with Drake May looking better. Still need to stop the fumbling problem of Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. I guess maybe it probably hasn't been, I haven't paid too close attention. I don't think it's been as bad in recent weeks, but still not a great team overall. Long way to go, but at least some upside for Gerard Mayo and the New England Patriots. But next we have the New York Jets, who I think you could very well make an argument that this team should be maybe 5 or 6 more lower. I do move them back one here, just because I guess this is another situation where I'm holding out false hope for an Aaron Rodgers-led Jets team with a stacked roster in many different places. But you see the fall off of the defense with Robert Saleh being gone. They haven't played well. Sauce Gardner hasn't gotten an interception. Aaron Rodgers isn't doing enough to save the team. You've got Breece Hall, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, all these guys that Rodgers wants to throw to, and they just can't put it together. I think it's majorly because of the offensive line, but at the end of the day, Jets still losing a lot of games, and I think in a similar position to the Cowboys, where it just seems like they're going to keep moving back and back and back. But for now, they're at 24 at 3-8, right behind the Saints, who have looked promising with Coach Rizzi coming in. Darren Rizzi, I believe is his name. He comes in and they have back-to-back wins now. So the Saints win the first 2 with Dennis Allen by wide margins. Saints are looking like a Super Bowl contender 2 weeks in. And then they lose 7 straight, and then they fire the coach. And then Darren Rizzi comes in, and they've won back-to-back weeks. They've gotten Taysom Hill more involved, and I think the defense has played better. And I don't know. I think just something was revitalized in that team, and it seems they get healthier too. I think that's definitely a part of it with Derek Carr coming back. But I think the team's been being utilized in better ways, especially as far as the offense goes, with Taysom Hill's role in the red zone and even just in the middle of the field with how talented he is. I think Taysom Hill might be one of the most interesting and probably greatest multi-positional players that we see in our lifetime, because he looks like whenever you could put him at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, fullback, tight end, any of those positions, he might not play that much, but he'll play like a starting caliber role at that position. So I think it's very impressive, and I think it's just a simple, dumb thing to say, oh, we need to use this guy more because he's a weapon with the ball in his hands, and they did, and able to win the game. So they move up to 23 for me, right behind the Chicago Bears, who only moved back 2 spots because they're at this point now where you do have to execute on these, where the game's decided by one play and where you have the win locked in, and then the coaching staff decides to make poor decisions that end up ruining this win. And this year, 2 game-winning drives for Caleb Williams that we would look at, I'd say we being a Bears fan, later in his career and we go in his rookie season, he had those 2 game-winning drives. He was able to take the team back against the rival Packers, against the rival, not rival, but I think Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams will be kind of looked at as rivals throughout their career, being drafted 1 and 2. And he gets losses in 2 very pivotal games, really because of the coaching staff and because of poor choices made. So the Bears keep moving their way back, although Caleb Williams has a promising week where he looks better and more, more involved in the offense in maybe his strengths as far as what the offense needs, getting the ball out faster, getting the power run game going. So I think the Bears, they only move back 2 spots, showing upside, but still you have to be able to win the games, and that's kind of the thing that I've preached about other teams, and like a reason that the Jaguars got moved back so far is because, at least they stay close in games. Well, it doesn't matter if you lose them all, and that's the situation the Bears are in. So at 4 and 6, the Bears move back to 22, lowest ranking 4 and 6 team, right behind the Cincinnati Bengals, who move back 4 spots, who just can't seem to win the games. They can play close, they'll play good offense, but they'll never win the game. Chargers take them down in this one, with the Chargers being one of the more well-rounded teams that I've seen, in my opinion, so far this year, with how well their defense has played and how their offense has done enough and even scored 30 points if they need to. So I think the Bengals, tough season for them with how poorly the defense has played all year so far. But I think the offense shows upside, and it's not enough to look dysfunctional. But they do sit at 21 for me, moving back 4 spots from last week at 17, trying to break into that upper half. But the Bengals end up being behind the Colts, they get a win over the Jets in a 1-point victory. And we just talked about, the Jets and how, they have all these pieces, and it's supposed to be this contender, and they just haven't played well. So I don't think the Colts are worthy of moving up super high because they beat the Jets. I think if you were to look at the rosters on paper, you'd go, wow, they really should. They should move up more because of it. But I think just because of how the team's been performing as a whole, I don't look at it as a super impressive win, beating a 3-8 team. So Falcons, although they move up to 5-6, they just move up 1 spot for me to 20 behind the Miami Dolphins, who keep moving up. I think the Dolphins have been kind of not super impressive by any means. They beat the Raiders, so not like a huge victory. But again, you get a victory, you start to string those wins together. They have a couple losses now that are in close games that they probably could have won. I just talked about with the Bears, you got to win those close games. But I think we could say that the Miami Dolphins have turned a corner in these prior weeks, and I think they're on the up. So I'm moving them up to 19 at 4-6, right behind the Seattle Seahawks, who get a win as well over the 49ers. And I think a huge game for the Seahawks because it puts them ahead of the 49ers as far as rankings in the division, and really harms the 49ers' chance if they don't get their shit together. In a massive game, I do only move them up 1 because they barely beat the 49ers, and evidently the 49ers have the same record as them, so they haven't looked that great this year. And you'll see we do have a big mover coming up that has to do with this division. But yeah, at 8, I move the Seahawks only up 1 spot to 18 again because it's tough to judge how impressive the win is. You'd say, before the season starts, you go, wow, the Seattle Seahawks beat the 49ers. Seattle Seahawks are going to be great this year, but the Seattle Seahawks have been very hit or miss, very tough to predict. They either show out or they just kind of flop and fold. And this week they do show out, and they get the win over Brock Purdy and the 49ers, moving them up to 18 at 5-5. Right behind the Rams, who are also 5-5. We talked about their win on this most recent week over the Patriots. Again, not super impressive win being over the Patriots, but I think you got to get these wins in the division. This is a similar situation where in the division it's very close. You got 3 teams that are 5-5, 1 that's 6-4. It's anybody's division, so you got to get the wins when you can, and they're able to do that. So at 5-5, they take down the Patriots and hopefully continue to move up in the division for their sake. But right now they're at 17 for me, behind the Atlanta Falcons, who were looking really good. I thought, a few weeks ago, I think I was calling them like a sleeper team, or like, look at, nobody's talking about the Falcons at, I think it was 6-4. And they were playing fairly good on defense. You could look at some of the names and go, wow, they have a nice secondary. And then, as far as the offense goes, they dealt with some injuries, but it seems like to me, they haven't utilized Bijan Robinson in the best way in these recent weeks. And it seems like there's been a little bit of a fall off from Kirk Cousins. I don't know if that's from injuries or just from the opponents they played. But the Falcons get another loss and they move back. And this is just an inept team this week, specifically against the Broncos. The Broncos have been one of the better defenses in the league this year. I've admitted that week in and week out. And then now that Bo Nix is playing better and has one of the greatest rookie performances ever, Falcons definitely could move back, but I'm kind of banking on this just being like a fluke week for them, and a time that they can bounce back from this. But if they keep losing, they'll keep moving back. But for now, they're right at mid tier where Kirk Cousins usually is, at 16 at 6-5, right behind the San Francisco 49ers. Again, another one of our biggest movers, where you lose to the Seahawks in a very important game, and you've strung together a few losses. You have Christian McCaffrey back, so you can't use that as an excuse. And I wish I could explain what's going on. I think a lot of people like to point the blame to Brock Purdy, and there's people calling for Shanahan's head. And I think it's just it's a rough situation for the 49ers because the expectation is higher than this. So I think uh, the reason they moved back so far for me this week is because I was kind of holding out hope, and I felt like an idiot because I'm putting this last week. I'm putting this 5-4 team ahead of a bunch of 6-7 win teams. I had them at 7, and now it's clear that they really are a middle of the pack team, and I think for them to do anything as far as making the playoffs or even making a run in the playoffs, they're going to have to do you're going to have to do something to get a streak going towards the end of the year. I talk about this with the Bills a lot, where it seems like the Bills, their hot streak gets going too early and they can never make it through the playoffs. And if they would just have their hot streak a little bit later in the season, they'd probably have a ring or two by now. But the 49ers in this case, I think just to be able to make the playoffs and be able to build off of the the heating up that their team would hopefully have for their sake, it's going to need to happen later in the season. So, but right now 5-5, and not even really confident that they'll make the playoffs, with their division being as close as it is, and the NFC being a little bit more difficult with some. You got the Packers are third in their division at 7-3, so that's going to be a tough one. You're going to need to have a lot of wins to make the playoffs in the NFC, and I don't know if the 49ers can do it. So we'll see. Now they're at 15, behind the Cardinals, who have a bye week. I don't like to move teams if I can't in the bye week, so they stay where they're at. Behind the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I just said that I don't like to move teams if they have a bye week. In this case, I move the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in their bye week back one spot because of how well the Denver Broncos have been playing. If you look at the progression throughout the year, their defense has been the one thing that's been consistent, and it's been good. They haven't really gotten completely blown out in games. For the most part, especially in recent weeks, they've just been winning games. And it's really been like this, I would almost say like perfect way of like visualizing a rookie quarterback developing, where you have a consistently good defense and an offense that's getting better. And you can see Bo Nix get better week in and week out. Whereas Caleb Williams has just shown flashes, and he was getting better every week until the Bears had their bye week. Then he regressed and has had probably 4 of the worst games in a row of his career. And then you have Jaden Daniels, where he came out really strong, and now he's been having some flub ups. So really like to see the development of Bo Nix so far. He's played incredibly well, and I think if he ends up being the guy, which I would assume most Denver Broncos fans have already determined that he's the guy, to just, don't want to crown somebody too early. He's clearly the franchise guy, though, for the next few years as far as how he's developing. But I think with how well he's been doing, it shows you a lot of upside moving forward as far as even making the playoffs. And I don't know about making a run. Making a run in the playoffs is tough for a rookie quarterback, but Bo Nix is a lot older than most rookie quarterbacks. So Broncos move up 4 spots, a big move up, and a absolute smacking over the Falcons. So they move up to 12 for me. Behind the Chargers, who I just talked about earlier as being one of the most well-rounded teams, this has been a team this year where you have a guy in Justin Herbert who's thrown for 5,000 yards and used to throwing the ball a bunch. And he's the quarterback for a team that's just playing great defense and running the ball well. So I think that that's just a lethal pairing when you've kind of been able to get away with him not having to use his arm like he has in the past. And maybe that's the reason that they have never been able to make a playoff run, or most of the time even make the playoffs. And I think Chargers looking like a much better team this year under Jim Harbaugh. And I really like how they're utilizing everybody. They lose their receivers and most of their stars on offense. They pick up J.K. Dobbins, and they've just been rolling with him. And it's been honestly great performances week in and week out for the Chargers. So they move up 2 spots to 11 for me, right behind the Green Bay Packers, who they really shouldn't have won the game. They move up because you got to win the close games. It's an important divisional game. If you look at this one, if they lose this, they go to 6-4, and the Bears go to 5-5. And then you look at, the Bears with their Commanders loss. The Packers had another close game. We're in a situation where you have a very close record between the Bears and the Packers. And this is kind of a solidifying game because it basically, I think, it didn't mathematically eliminate the Bears from the playoffs, but it made it very difficult to where the Bears they'll probably have to sweep the Lions or the Vikings, and then at the very least beat this Packers team to even have a chance at playoffs. So doing that to your division rival and one of the greatest rivalries in history is, to me, worthy, moving up a little bit. But because I don't think they played winning football and they didn't outperform the Bears, who have looked really bad this year, I thought it was only worthy of moving up one. And I think it would be very easy to argue that you can move them behind the Chargers with how poorly Jordan Love has performed this year, and honestly how poorly the team performed in this game. But they got the win. So that's at the end of the day, it's all about whose score is higher than the other. But as far as ranking the team and ranking the skill and how they played, I don't think they played better. So they only move up one spot, right behind the Washington Commanders, who stay put where they're at. And this is another one where, like, they lose, but it's to the Eagles. The Eagles, it is a division rival, so it's important. But it was a really tough game, and I think the Commanders are still playing better football than the Packers. So I think that's the only reason that they really stay ahead for me. I think the Commanders are a good football team, but they face some tough opponents and now have not beat a team with a winning record, which I think is an interesting stat to talk about when you talk about, everybody talks about, Jayden Daniels, and he's won so many Player of the Weeks, and he's so amazing. But they haven't beat a team with a winning record yet. So I think, with that being said, you have to wonder, like, is the Commanders, are they really this 7-4 top tier guaranteed playoff team if you haven't beat anybody with a winning record? So I think that's very important to me, but that's why they stay put. And they stay put in a loss. It's just I don't like overreacting to 1 week. But if they continue to lose to these top 10 football teams, they aren't worthy of being in the top 10. So I guess the way I talk about it, sounding like they're on their way out of the top 10, but not for now. For now, they're at 9 at 7-4, right behind the Houston Texans, who I have move up. They get a big win, over the Dallas Cowboys, where they murder them. It wasn't even close. Cowboys never had a chance. And that's kind of what I've been calling for these Texans to do, and they've done it these last 2 weeks, where most games this year they played down to their opponent. CJ Stroud hadn't played very well, and honestly, still in these past 4 to 5 weeks, has not really played very good football. But Joe Mixon has been one of the best running backs in the league, and DeMeco Ryans has been commanding that defense and doing enough to win games. But what I had been asking for is the Texans to really blow out a bad team. They played down to the Bears and some of the other teams, bad teams in the league this year, that they should have gotten big wins over. The Colts, they should have gotten big wins over, and they just barely win. Now, at the end of the day, all you have to do is barely win to get that number up in your win column. But I think with these last 2 weeks, they've really shown that they can blow out these bad teams and keep a close game and win against good teams. So I have them move up 2 spots to 7-4, right behind the Minnesota Vikings, who do move back in a loss to the Titans. And it's just because the game was too close for me against the Titans. I've ranked the Titans as one of the worst in the league. The Vikings played down to the Jaguars last week. Now they played down to the Titans, and they're at 8-2. They have the winning record and one of the best records in the league, but they're just not playing. I keep saying playing winning football, but I think that it seems like they're playing down to their opponents, and Sam Darnold is not playing like first 5 weeks Sam Darnold, and it's causing issues for the team to where they're in these close games against 2 teams that are in the 30 and 32 spot in my ranking. So I talked about it earlier, you really have to blow out teams that are really bad. You can't play down to your opponents if you're going to be in the top 10. And despite Minnesota getting wins every which way they look, I think it's definitely a sign that they're not this this juggernaut at the top like we might have thought that they were at the beginning. So at 8-2, the Vikings move back a spot to 7, right behind another team moving back, the Baltimore Ravens, who they get in this particular week, they get a loss. They're just the Ravens are another very hit or miss team this year, because you have Derrick Henry, you have Lamar Jackson, and you have all these weapons, and you still find a way to lose to the Pittsburgh Steelers. You've lost to the Raiders, and just to some of these teams that you really shouldn't lose against, and it's really to the detriment of their defense. Now, in this one, their offense could not do anything. Lamar Jackson completely got shut down by the Steelers, and the Steelers just made fools of them, and so they move back pretty far 3 spots at 7-4. having some bad losses on their schedule. To the Pittsburgh Steelers though. So I mentioned that when you have a team beats another team, they're close in the rankings, and I think it's worthy. They'll move past them, and the Steelers do that. They beat the Ravens, who I had at the number 3 spot, looking like one of the better teams in the league, and then the Steelers do just that. Steelers go 4-2 with a guy like Justin Fields, who I think is better than Kenny Pickett. But you look at the quarterbacks over the last few years, since Ben Roethlisberger, and anybody has been able to play quarterback, and they've still been able to have a winning record with Mike Tomlin being there, whether it be Kenny Pickett, Duck Hodges, Mason Rudolph. They all came in and played in these games, and the Steelers have still had a winning record. Now you bring in a guy like Russell Wilson, who everybody's giving him shit, really didn't have a bad year with the Broncos. I think underwhelming in comparison to like Super Bowl Russell Wilson, but he still had like 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Nobody wanted him for whatever reason at the cheapest possible contract ever. And for a guy his caliber, and now he's coming in and bringing the Steelers to a next level and wins the game against the Ravens here. So at 8-2, they move up 3 spots and make it into my top 5, right behind the Philadelphia Eagles, who just keep winning. Blown out. So I asked earlier, this is another team where I thought they played down to their opponents, had some wins that maybe even shouldn't have had, and then in these prior weeks they've just been blowing out these bad teams, just like I've asked. And then in this one, they beat the Commanders in a very important game, a division rival, who, if they lose, both teams are at 7-3, and it's a much different scenarios for the division. So Eagles kind of catapult themselves up in the division. Now moving up to me in my power rankings to the 4 spot, which there was a point in the week where I said I don't know if they'll be able to hold it in my top 10. And now they're just killing it. So moving up to 4, 8-2, and a great year for the Eagles, especially in these last few weeks. But they're right behind it. Keep them behind the Kansas City Chiefs. It's honestly just the 9-1 record. I think you could definitely make a case for the Eagles to be higher than the Chiefs. But I think because the Chiefs they're 9-1 and they've always found a way to win those close games. It's just tough for me to move them back much farther. But in finally getting a loss after way too long to the Buffalo Bills, the Chiefs move out of that 2 spot that they've been in for so many weeks, and they move back to 3. Again, I think they couldn't move back, especially if they have another loss. Eagles have another win, they'll definitely be ahead of them. And but yeah, the Chiefs are going to need to stay hot if they want a three-peat. But they move back 1 for now at 9-1 to the 3 spot behind the Buffalo Bills. Talked about this earlier. When you beat a team and you're close in the rankings, you're probably going to go ahead of them. The Bills do just that. They have a worse record, but they beat the Kansas City Chiefs by 9 points. And Josh Allen has looked phenomenal this year. And despite losing a lot of pieces on their defense and Stephon Diggs and some offensive pieces, they've still found ways to win games. And they move to 9-2, and they move up 2 spots to number 2. For me, right behind the guys who have stayed at number 1 for most of the season at number 1. The Detroit Lions, can't move them out because they completely they'll dominate good teams and bad teams, and they do look like a juggernaut in this league. So they do have a loss. They have an insane point differential at 159, and doesn't seem like anybody can stop them. We'll have to see if they can be stopped this week. Or, I think Thanksgiving is an interesting week. They consistently lose that one, but they play the Bears. So I think everything's on the up for the Lions, and I don't think I'd even move them out of the 1 spot after 1 loss. They'd probably have to have a couple losses to move out of there. But for right now, they're going to stay at 1 at 9-1. And then that's going to be it. So I'd like to look at the big picture at the end here. Look at teams that maybe when I see them next to each other on here, then I'm like, I don't know if that's where they should be. So in this case, like I said, I think that you could make an easy case for the Eagles to be ahead of the Chiefs. I wouldn't even really argue that there. I think you could make a case for the Chargers, probably ahead of the Packers, and maybe even the Washington too, just with recency bias. I like where the Broncos are at. I think the Buccaneers could be too high. They could definitely move the Buccaneers back, but the thing is their losses have been to some better teams. So I think an easy one to do would be to move the Buccaneers to 15 and then put the 49ers and the Cardinals up to 13 and 14. I definitely could see that happening soon just because the Buccaneers did lose to the 49ers, but I thought they were a good team at the time. So that's why I kind of ranked them as like, well, they're good. They're 4-6, but they're still good because they're, some of their recent losses are super close games against the Chiefs and the 49ers. Then towards the bottom of the list, I think you could see, the Browns. I think with Jameis, if he can not turn the ball over, I think they could definitely move up out of that dysfunctional spot with how well their defense plays. And with Nick Chubb coming back, Jameis, I think there's upside there. I think the Saints could keep moving up. I would hope for my Bears to move up with Thomas Brown coming in and doing a lot better with the offense, just in 1 week, but a lot better there. So let me know what you think down below. That's going to be it for this one. Thank you for watching and have a great day.